Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for coming. My name is Keith Harvey Proctor. I'm joined today by one of my solicitors, Mr. Nabil Gashrad of Socky Solicitors in Leicester. I wish to make a statement. I am a private citizen. I have not held public office, and I have not sought public office since May 1987. As such, I am entitled to be regarded as a private citizen. Since the general election of 1987, I have sought a private life. I have been enjoying a full life, gainfully employed, and personally happy. This all came to an abrupt end on the 4th of March 2015. What now follows is a statement on my present predicament created by an unidentified person making totally untrue claims against my name. Before going any further, I wish to make it clear that the genuine victims of child sexual abuse have my fullest sympathy and support. And I would expect the full weight of the law to be used against anyone, be ever so high or ever so low, committing such odious offences. Nobody, and I repeat, nobody, is above the law. However, I attach equal weight to justice for innocent people wrongly accused of child sexual abuse, especially when it is done anonymously. This is what is happening to me and many high-profile figures, many of whom are dead and cannot answer back. This statement is necessarily lengthy and detailed and at times complicated. Please bear with me, and at the end I will be prepared to answer your questions. On the 18th of June 2015, at my request, I was interviewed by the Metropolitan Police Murder Squad, Operation Midland. This interview lasted over 6 hours. At the very outset, I had to help the police with my full name, which they appeared not to know. It may surprise you that it was over 3.5 months after my home was searched for 15 hours, and more than 7 months after the most serious allegations were made against me, that I was interviewed. I went on to cooperate fully with the police with their investigation. The allegations have been made by a person who the police have dubbed with a pseudonym, Nick. He appears on television with a blacked out face and an actor's voice. All of this is connected with alleged historical child sexual abuse in the 1970s and the 1980s. Nick was interviewed by the police in the presence of a reporter from Exare, an odd internet news agency. As a Member of Parliament, I always spoke in favour of the police. I believe in law and order, and I believe in equipping the police to do their job. And with my track record, it will come as a surprise that I have grave and growing concerns about the police generally, and more specifically, Operation Midland. I have decided to share these concerns with you. I believe I am not just speaking for myself today. I hope I am not being presumptuous when I say I feel I am speaking for those who have no voice whatsoever, including the dead to whom I referred a few moments ago. 2 days before my interview with the police, my solicitors, Sarkey Solicitors of Leicester, was sent a disclosure document. It set out the matters the police wished to discuss with me. It was the first time I had known of what I had been accused. On the day of my interview, I was not arrested, nor placed on police bail. I was told I could leave the police station at any time and that it was a voluntary interview. I and my solicitors have previously been told I was not a suspect. At the end of the interview, I was given no information as to how much longer the police investigation would take to bring the matter to a conclusion. I think you will understand I cannot allow this matter to rest. So you can gauge how angry I am, and in an attempt to stop the drip, drip, drip of allegations by the police into the media, I now wish to share with you in detail the uncorroborated and untrue allegations that have been made against me by Nick. Anyone of a delicate or nervous disposition should leave the room now. The following is taken from the police disclosure document given to my solicitors 2 days before my first interview with the police, under the headings circumstances, homicides, and sexual abuse. I quote, and it is a very long quotation. Circumstances. The victim in this investigation is identified under the pseudonym Nick. He made allegations to the Metropolitan Police Service in late 2014. Due to the nature of the offences alleged, Nick is entitled to have his identity withheld. Nick stated that he was the victim of systematic and serious sexual abuse by a group of adult males over a period between 1975 and 1984. The abuse was often carried out whilst in the company with other boys whom were also abused by the group. Nick provided names of several individuals involved in these acts, including Mr. Harvey Proctor. He states Mr. Proctor abused him on a number of occasions, which included sexual assault, buggery, and torturous assault. He also states Mr. Proctor was present when he was assaulted by other adult males. Furthermore, Nick states he witnessed the murder of 3 young boys on separate occasions. He states Mr. Proctor was directly responsible for 2 of the allegations and implicated in the 3rd. I continue to quote. The dates and locations relevant to Mr. Proctor are as follows. Homicides. 1980, at a residential house in central London. Nick was driven by car to an address in the Pimlico, Belgravia area, where a second boy, the victim, was also collected in the same vehicle. Both boys, aged approximately 12, were driven to another similar central London address. Mr. Proctor was present with another male. Both boys were led to the back of the house. Mr. Proctor then stripped the victim and tied him to a table. He then produced a large kitchen knife and stabbed the child through the arm and other parts of the body over a period of 40 minutes. A short time later, Mr. Proctor untied the victim and anally raped him on the table. The other male stripped Nick and anally raped him over the table. Mr. Proctor then strangled the victim with his hands until the boy's body went limp. Both males then left the room. Later, Mr. Proctor returned and led Nick out of the house and into a waiting car. 1981 to 1982. At a residential address in central London, Nick was collected from Kingston train station and taken to a party at a residential address. The witness was among 4 young boys. Several men were present, including Mr. Proctor. One of the men told the boys one of them would die that night and they had to choose who. When the young boys wouldn't decide, the men selected one of the boys, the victim. Each of the 4 boys, including Nick, were taken to separate rooms for private time. When they all returned to the same room, Nick was anally raped by Mr. Proctor and another male as punishment. The other males also anally raped the remaining boys. Mr. Proctor and 2 other males then began beating the chosen victim by punching and kicking. The attack continued until the boy collapsed on the floor and stopped moving. All of the men left the room. The remaining boys attempted to revive the victim, but he was not breathing. They were left for some time before being taken out of the house and returned to their homes. Between May and July 1979, in a street in Coombe Hill, Kingston, Nick was walking in this area with another boy, the victim, when he heard the sound of a car engine revving. A dark-coloured car drove into the victim, knocking him down. Nick could see the boy covered in blood and his leg bent backwards. A car pulled up and Nick was grabbed and placed in the car. He felt a sharp pain in his arm and next remembered being dropped off at home. He was warned not to have friends in future. Nick never saw the boy again. Nick does not identify Mr. Proctor as being directly involved in this allegation. However, he states Mr. Proctor was part of the group responsible for the systematic sexual abuse he suffered. Furthermore, he believes the group were responsible for the homicide. I continue to quote from the disclosure document. Sexual abuse, 1978 to 1984. Dolphin Square, Pimlico. Nick was at the venue and with at least one other young boy. Mr. Proctor was present with other males. Mr. Proctor told Nick to pick up a wooden baton and hit the other boy. When Nick refused, he was punished by Mr. Proctor and the other males. He was held down and felt pain in his feet. He fell unconscious. When he awoke, he was raped by several males, including Mr. Proctor. 1978 to 1981. Carlton Club, Central London. Nick was driven to the Carlton Club and dropped off outside. Mr. Proctor opened the door. Inside the premises were several other males. Nick was sexually assaulted by another male, not by Mr. Proctor on this occasion. 1978 to 1981. Swimming pool in central London. Nick was taken to numerous pool parties where he and other boys were made to undress and perform sexual acts on one another. He and other boys were then anally raped and sexually abused by several men, including Mr. Proctor. 1981 to 1982, large townhouse in London. Nick was taken to the venue on numerous occasions where Mr. Proctor and one other male were present. He was forced to perform oral sex on Mr. Proctor, who also put his hands around Nick's throat to prevent him breathing. On another occasion at the same location, Mr. Proctor sexually assaulted Nick before producing a penknife and threatening to cut Nick's genitals. Mr. Proctor was prevented from doing so by the other male present. 1979 to 1984, residential address in central London. Nick was taken to the venue. Mr. Proctor was present with one other male. Mr. Proctor forced Nick to perform oral sex on him before beating him with punches. 1978 to 1984, numerous locations including Carlton Club, Dolphin Square and a central London townhouse. Nick described attending several Christmas parties where other boys were present together with numerous males, including Mr. Proctor. Nick was given whiskey to drink before being forced to perform oral sex on several men, including Mr. Proctor. Mr. Proctor will be interviewed about the matters described above and give the opportunity to provide an account. End quote. I denied all and each of the allegations in turn and in detail, and categorised them as false and untrue, and in whole a heinous calumny. They amount to just about the worst allegations anyone can make against another person, including, as they do, multiple murder of children, their torture, grievous bodily harm, rape, and sexual child abuse. I am completely innocent of all these allegations. I am a homosexual. I am not a murderer. I'm not a paedophile or pederast. Let me be frank. I pleaded guilty to 4 charges of gross indecency in 1987 relating to the then age of consent for homosexual activity. Those offences are no longer offences as the age of consent has dropped from 21 to 18 to 16. What I am being accused of now is a million miles away from that consensual activity. At the start of the interview, I was told that although the interview would be recorded by the police both for vision and sound, I would not receive a copy of the tapes. I asked to record the interview for sound myself, but my request was refused. During the interview, to ensure that Nick had not identified the wrong person, I asked if I could see photographs purporting to be me which had been shown to him. My request was refused. At the end of the interview, I was asked if I knew my 8 alleged co-conspirators whose homes it was alleged I had visited. I believe I have a good recollection, and the list comprised a number of people I knew, some who I had heard of but not met, and some I did not know. None of the allegations were alleged to have taken place at my home, and I have not visited the homes of any of the gang. The list included the names of the late Leon Britton and the late Edward Heath. If it was not so serious, it would be laughable. Edward Heath sacked me from the Conservative Party's parliamentary candidates list in 1974. Mrs. Thatcher restored me to the list 18 months later. Edward Heath despised me, and he disliked my views, particularly on limiting immigration from the new Commonwealth and Pakistan, and my opposition to our entry into and continued membership of what is now known as the EU. I opposed his corporate statist views on the economy. I despised him too. He had sacked the late Enoch Powell, my political hero, from the Shadow Cabinet when I was chairman of the University of York Conservative Association. I regarded Enoch as an intellectual giant in comparison with Heath. The same Edward Heath, not surprisingly, would never speak to me in the House of Commons, but would snort at me as he passed me by in a Commons corridor. The feeling was entirely mutual. Now I am accused of doing some of these dreadful things in his London house as well, a house to which I was never invited, and to which Heath would never have invited me, and to which I would have declined his invitation. The same Edward Heath's home, with CCTV, housekeeper, private secretary, chauffeur, police and private detectives, all the trappings of a former Prime Minister in the security-conscious days of the IRA's assault on London. It is so far-fetched as to be unbelievable. It is unbelievable because it is not true. My situation has transformed from Kafkaesque bewilderment to black farce incredulity. I have nothing to hide and nothing to fear. I appeal to any witness who truthfully can place me at any of the former homes of Edward Heath or Leon Britton at any time to come forward now. I appeal to any witness who can truthfully say I committed any of these horrible crimes to come forward now. The gang is also alleged to have included Lord Janner, a former Labour Member of Parliament, Lord Bramall, former Chief of the General Staff, the late Maurice Oldfield, former Head of Secret Intelligence Service MI6, the late Sir Michael Hanley, Director General of the Internal Security Services MI5, General Sir Hugh Beach, Master General of the Ordnance, and a man named Ray Beach. I did not move in such circles. As an ex-secondary modern schoolboy from Yorkshire, I was not a part of the establishment. I had no interest being part of it. I cannot believe that these other 8 people conspired to do these monstrous things. I certainly did not. Yesterday, I was interviewed again by the Metropolitan Police Murder Squad for 1 hour and 40 minutes. It was a voluntary interview. I was free to go at any time. I was not arrested. I'm not on bail. Unhelpfully, the second disclosure document was given to me some 20 minutes after yesterday's interview was supposed to have started rather than last Friday, as had been promised. My solicitors were told by the police it was ready, but had to be signed off by superior officers on Friday. The Metropolitan Police are either inefficient or doing it by design. Whatever else, it is inept and an unjust way to treat anyone. During yesterday's interview, I was shown a photograph of Nick, aged about 12. I did not recognise him. I was shown computer-generated e-fit images of 2 of the alleged murder victims created by Nick. They looked remarkably similar to each other, but one with blonde hair and one dark brown. I did not recognise either image. I was asked if I knew Jimmy Savile. I told them I did not. Nick alleges, surprise, surprise, that Savile attended the sex parties. I was asked if I knew a number of people, including Leslie Goddard and Peter Heyman. I did not know these 2. I was asked if I knew well a doctor, unnamed. Apparently, Nick alleges the doctor was a friend of mine, and allegedly he turned up to repair the damage done to the boys when they had been abused at these parties. I could not help there either. I was asked if I could recognise images of the penknife mentioned earlier. It was suggested it was Edward Heath who persuaded me not to castrate Nick with it. I was obviously so persuaded by Mr. Heath's intervention that I placed the penknife in Nick's pocket, ready for him to present it to the Metropolitan Police over 30 years later as evidence. I could not identify the knife. I've never had a penknife. I was asked if I visited Elm Guest House in Rocks Lane, Barnes. I wondered when that elephant in the room would be mentioned by the Metropolitan Police. I am sorry to have to disappoint the fantasists on the internet, but I did not visit Elm Guest House. I was unaware of its existence. The so-called guest list, which makes its appearance on the net, must be a fake. During my first interview, I was told that the police were investigating to seek out the truth. I reminded them on a number of occasions that their head of Operation Midland, Detective Superintendent Ken Macdonald, had said on television some months ago, and I quote, "I believe what Nick is saying as credible and true," unquote. This statement is constantly used and manipulated by Xaro and other media to justify their position. This remark is very prejudicial to the police inquiry and its outcome. It is not justice and breaches my United Kingdom and human rights. This whole catalogue of events has wrecked my life, lost me my job, and demolished 28 years of rehabilitation since 1987. The police involved in Operation Midland are in a cleft stick. It's of their own making. They are in a quandary. Support the victim, however ludicrous his allegations, or own up to that they have got it disastrously wrong, but risk the charge of a cover-up. What do I think should happen now? I should be arrested, charged and prosecuted for murder and these awful crimes immediately, so I can start the process of ridiculing these preposterous allegations in open court. Or Nick should be stripped of his anonymity and prosecuted for wasting police time and money, making the most foul of false allegations and seeking to pervert the course of justice. Those who have aided and abetted him should also be prosecuted. Nick should be medically examined to ensure he is of sound mind. Detective Superintendent Ken Macdonald should resign from his position as head of Operation Midland. He should resign or be sacked. But as the Metropolitan Police is a bureaucratic organisation, I suggest to save face he is slid sideways to be placed in control of Metropolitan London parking, traffic, jaywalking or crime prevention. He too should be medically examined to ensure he is of sound mind. An investigation should be launched into Operation Midland and its costs. Detectives' expense claims should be analysed and a full audit carried out by independent auditors. Those Labour members of Parliament who have misused parliamentary privilege and their special position on these matters should apologise. They have behaved disgracefully, especially attacking dead parliamentarians who cannot defend themselves and others, and they should make amends. They are welcome to sue me for libel. In particular, Mr. Tom Watson MP should state outside the protection of the House of Commons the names of ex-ministers and ex-members of Parliament who he feels are part of the so-called alleged Westminster rent boy ring. Lady Goddard's inquiry should examine Operation Midland's methods so as to sift genuine historical child sexual abuse from the spurious. Operation Midland should be wound up by the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, who should also apologise at the earliest opportunity. On the 6th of August 2015, Sir Bernard Hogan Howe shed crocodile tears criticising the Independent Police Complaints Commission and Wiltshire Police for naming Edward Heath as a suspect. He said it was not fair and his own force would not do such a thing. This is very disingenuous. When his police officers were searching my home, and before they had left, the press were ringing me, asking for comment. I was identified. They had told Nick of the search, who passed on the information to his press friends. The Metropolitan Police have also told the press that they were investigating Heath and Britton and others. Sir Bernard should resign for the sin of hypocrisy. If he does not, it will not be long before he establishes Operation Plantagenet to determine Richard III's involvement in the murder of the princes in the Tower of London. Superintendent Sean Memory of Wiltshire Police should explain why he made a statement about Edward Heath in front of his former home in Salisbury, and who advised him to select that venue. He should resign. Leon Britton was driven to his death by police action. They already knew for 6 months before his death, on the advice of the DPP, that he would not face prosecution for the alleged rape of a young woman. But they did not tell him. They just hoped he would die without having to tell him. The superintendent in charge of his investigation should resign. The police should stop referring automatically to people who make statements of alleged historical child sexual abuse as victims. They should refer to them as complainants, from the French to lament, which will be more appropriate. Parliament should pass laws to better balance the right to anonymity of victims and the accused. Parliament should reinstate in law the English tradition of innocence before being found guilty, which has been trashed in recent months by certain sections of the police, the DPP, members of Parliament, magistrates, and the courts themselves. I have not just come here today with a complaint. I have come with the intention of showing my face in public as an innocent man. I have come to raise my voice as an aggrieved subject now deeply concerned about the administration of justice. What has become increasingly clear about police investigations into historical child sexual abuse is that it has been bungled in years gone by and is being bungled again now. The moment has come to ask ourselves if the police are up to the test of investigating the apparent complexities of such an inquiry. These allegations merit the most detailed and intellectually rigorous application. What is clear from the last few years of police activity, driven by the media, fearful of the power of the internet and the odd MP here and there, is that the overhaul of the police service up and down the country is now urgently required. We need super cops who have been university educated and drawn from the professions. Such people could be of semi-retirement status with a background in the supervision of complex criminal investigation. These people could be drawn from the law, accountancy and insolvency practices. Former justices of the peace could chair some of these investigations. Adequate incentives should be provided to recruit them. I speak for myself, and as a former Tory MP with an impeccable record in defending the police, I've now come to believe that the blind trust in them was totally misplaced. What has happened to me could happen to anyone. It could happen to you. In summary, the paranoid police have pursued a homosexual witch hunt on this issue, egged on by a motley crew of certain sections of the media and press, and a number of Labour members of Parliament, and a ragbag of internet fantasists. There are questions to ask about what kind of police force do we have in Britain today? How can it be right for the police to act in concert with the press with routine tip-offs of house raids, impending arrests and the like? Anonymity is given to anyone prepared to make untruthful accusations of child sexual abuse, while the alleged accused are routinely fingered publicly without any credible evidence first being found. This is not justice. It is an abuse of power and authority. In conclusion, I wish to thank my solicitors, Mr. Razi Saki and Mr. Nabil Gatrad, and my family and friends for their support, without which I would not have been able to survive. this onslaught on my character and on my life, I now propose to let you have written copies of the statement, and after that I'll be prepared to answer any of your questions.
Can I get past?
Take the first question. Yes, sir.
Tom Simon, BBC News. With regard to the first interview and your second interview, can you give us an idea whether you felt that any of the allegations you faced in the first interview were not being pursued in the second interview? So was there anything they said to you, the police said to you, made you feel they decided there was no substance in any of those allegations?
No, sir.
Daniel Simon from the BBC. Are all the allegations that are being put to you to do with allegations by me? Are there any other allegations being put to you other than allegations made by me?
The allegations put to me in the two interviews that I've held with the Metropolitan Police are based solely on Nick's evidence to them.
Has there been any suggestion from the police that there are allegations by other people in the two interviews that you've had with them?
No, sir.
So it's one man's allegation?
That is my understanding, sir. Yes, sir.
Alistair Jackson from Panorama. Have the police mentioned anything about material on your computers and the results of any forensic searches on them?
They have said some things about the computers, but it takes a long time to look at all of that material, and nothing has come back so far.
So that's still going on?
There are a lot of computers.
And can I have a second question? To what extent have you been in touch with either people who are suspects or the surviving members of their families and friends? To what extent have you communicated with those about what you were planning to do to them?
I have no names have been given to me of anyone involved in this investigation. So the question is
sorry,
the question is not
have you been
relevant.
in touch with either people who are accused like yourself or people who survived deceased people who have been accused to tell them what you were planning to do to them?
No, sir.
Not at all.
Julian Drucker, 5 News. Is all of this today a good idea, do you think, or should you just let the process happen and speak?
I have thought seriously and long and hard about what to do about the predicament in which I find myself. It is entirely my judgment, but I could not, as I said in my statement, allow for months to come drip, drip, drip allegations into the media. I therefore have decided to lay everything before you. It is for you to judge, and in due course for the police to make their decisions. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Outside of the BBC, the prosecution of you in 1987 with regard to rent boys has been well publicised, and the age of consent has changed. Is there anything in the time since then in your life that you can see might have been misconstrued in any way to look like these allegations by somebody?
Remember, these allegations are from a period of the mid-1970s to 1984. 3 years, ending 3 years before 1987, when I pleaded guilty to 4 charges of gross indecency. There is nothing that I can think that can have given rise to these allegations.
Mark Watts from Exeter.
Yes.
You have denied that you were part of any rent boy ring, the phrase that you used, that involves cabinet ministers, members of parliament, or generals. You made that denial on today's programme on the 5th of March. Can you please explain how you knew that generals were suspected of being part of the paedophile?
I was told. I was told, just as you do not reveal your sources, nor will I to you.
Because you realise it was never said publicly that that was the case. Was it not an incriminating comment made?
No, I don't think so. I think you will find, if you churn through the media at the time, that it was stated before I went on the Today programme.
It was not stated in the media, Mr. Proctor, so I'm asking, how did you know that, if you weren't involved?
Well, then that's a difference of opinion. But I'm
It's
not
a matter of record, it's easily searched.
I'm not going to protect my source. I'm going to protect my sources.
Was it a source or was it in the media? Which one is it?
Both. Yes, sir.
Duncan Golestani, ITV News. Do you think you are being victimised because of your previous convictions and because you're a gay man?
I think that's a question that you've got to ask other people. I feel vulnerable and I feel I'm in difficulties, and therefore I've done what I've done today, clearly to put everything out in the open. And I'm sorry that some people in the media should wish to try and sort of keep information to themselves, ready for the time when they wish to drip it into the media. That's the reason why I've done it today, to end this drip, drip, drip into the media by other people.
Do you think it's the police leaking that information?
I know that information from the police concerning the case goes straight back to Nick. It is a matter of procedure with the police on these matters, and he no doubt tells his press friends. Yes, sir.
Paul Beachy from The Independent. You've criticised a lot of people today. Are you planning to sue and to go on record on oath and say some of the things that you said today?
I'm not a wealthy man. One thing in my political career I learnt was, for God's sake, do not sue. It's too expensive. And every libel action that I've been involved with, and I have sued for libel, and I've been sued for libel, and I've taken part in other libel trials, always the wrong result comes up.
Mr. Proctor, Tom Palmer from Scully. The second part of that question was about whether or not you'd be prepared to go on oath and explain what you've explained today. Would that be the case?
Of course.
And during your discussions with the police, have there been any other indiscretions that you have revealed to them in the spirit of transparency?
What have you in mind?
I do not know.
Neither do I.
Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Martin from the Daily Mail. You talk a bit more broadly about what reforms are needed, you say, to protect those who are truly innocent. That's come out of this.
I'd refer you to the statement that I've made, where I've made a number of suggestions. I'm no longer a Member of Parliament. I'm no longer privy to the day-to-day discussions in the House of Commons. But I think that parliamentarians should address these issues further than the remarks I made in my statement. I wouldn't wish to go today. But I think it's up to politicians, ministers and politicians, to grapple with these difficult issues.
Fiona Hamilton from the Times. Just on that question, a bit more detail. Would you support the right of anonymity for accused in sexual abuse cases?
Would I?
Would you support the right of anonymity for people such as yourself?
I think it needs to be better balanced, and in certain cases, yes. The stable door is well and truly busted open in my case, but for other people, I wouldn't want other people to go through what I've been experiencing in recent months. Yes, sir.
Has anybody been from the Conservative Party or current officials been in contact with you in relation to these allegations that you've been facing, or anybody from the modern political circles?
I resigned as a member of the Conservative Party in 1987. I've had no official dealings with the Conservative Party at any level since then. So the answer to your question is no.
The incident in Coombe Hill that you mentioned, did the police give you any identification of the victim, not Nick, the other individual?
No. No names, with the exception of yesterday's 2 EFITs that could be actually anyone. No information at all. Yes, sir.
Daniel Sanford again from the BBC. I mean, clearly the allegations that Nick has made are very, very serious allegations, and no passage of time should mean they shouldn't be followed up. What is it that you complain about what the police have done when you say that Kenny Macdonald should resign, Bernard Hogan Howe should resign? What is it that you complain about that they have done? Is it the fact that your name has been put out there? What is it actually that is making you so angry?
With the superintendent, he went on television and said Nick's allegations are credible and true. I do not think any other police officer would go into the media and say that before the conclusion of a trial.
So you don't complain about the investigation of the allegations, it's just the manner in which some of the public statements have been handled.
I certainly think this matter should be investigated, and there is the police have a duty to expedite investigations. They can't just dawdle and drag their feet because it might be difficult in the press. They should get on with it. That's my criticism. The 2 months that took place, the interval of 2 months between the first and the second investigation interview and what they were talking about yesterday was quite frankly pathetic, if that's all that they come up with in a period of 2 months.
Have the police given you any indication when they're going to contact you again?
No.
At this point? Did you ever meet Jimmy Savile?
No.
Never?
I said to the police, look, as a Member of Parliament, I was addressing 2 or 3 meetings a week, if not more. Some of those meetings could have between 500 and 1,000 people. Whether Jimmy Savile was in an audience and I met him at a cocktail party, I have no recollection of meeting Jimmy Savile at all while I was a Member of Parliament or in this period.
Harvey.
That's right.
What other items were removed from your property during the search? You mentioned computers. Was anything else removed at the time?
There were, but I'm being given the wink from my solicitor that I shouldn't reveal exactly the nature of what was taken.
Why is that?
And what's the adage that you don't have a dog and bark yourself? So have my sister not given me the wink on that, I would have
just
told.
explain why there's a problem with answering.
Sorry, I can't see you.
Can the solicitor,
Yes.
explain why there is a problem with answering that question?
We simply choose not to, sir.
That's it.
Thank you.
Can any items been returned to you following the search?
No, sir.
Sorry, just going back to the Jimmy Savile issue. Were you told that Nick alleges that he was abused by Jimmy Savile, or just that he was a visitor to these parties?
The latter.
That he wasn't abused by it? Or had you not been told that he claims to have been abused by it?
Correct. I was told that Nick had alleged that Jimmy Savile was a visitor at some of these parties.
Or didn't abuse him? You were
Sorry?
told he hadn't abused Nick by it, so.
I wasn't told that either yes or no. Yes, sir.
Tim Burberry, Channel 4 News. Do you believe that it's a coincidence that you are holding this press conference today and that it was only yesterday that you were interviewed by the police, having planned this press conference beforehand?
To be fair, the press conference was planned or timed for this week. I did know for a little while that the police wanted to interview me a second time. They gave me a time span in which they wanted to interview me, and I selected yesterday as the day to meet them.
Mr. Proctor, how are you so categoric in saying that there was no abuse ring in Westminster in the 70s and 80s?
It's my opinion, my knowledge of being at the time and being a homosexual. I think you've got to remember that in 1980s the climate was completely different. I don't think there was any Conservative Member of Parliament who was out at the time I was a Member of Parliament. They were very much in the closet as I was. The situation is quite different now where you can be a homosexual and in the cabinet. But that wasn't the case at the time. It wasn't that I as a homosexual were embarrassed or upset by being a homosexual. It's just that I did not think it had anything to do with my work and role as a Member of Parliament. I didn't ask my constituents what their sexual activities was, nor did they ask me. What happens in the bedroom has always been, from my point of view, a private matter, not just for me, but for everybody else, unless it's illegal. And when, at the earliest opportunity in 1987, when I discovered that I had committed inadvertently an illegal act, I pleaded guilty at the earliest opportunity.
But does that experience give...
But to answer directly what you're saying, I did not know at the time that there was any Westminster rent boy ring. I did not have discussions with any other Member of Parliament. It would be unthinkable to have discussions with any other Members of Parliament about sexual matters of that type. If one was going ahead, if there was a Westminster rent boy ring, and I think I know where the term comes from, but if there was one, I was not party to it, I was a loner. I think I was regarded in the House of Commons to be politically a loner, and certainly socially I was a loner too. Yes,
Tom
sir.
Bateman from the BBC. When you use the term rent boy there, because its meaning has changed over time, are you talking about prostitution? And I wonder about when you say you inadvertently committed a crime in 1987. I just wonder, because of your guilty plea, there wasn't much detail in court. But was this prostitution? What actually happened?
Well, Sir David Napley, the late Sir David Napley was my solicitor, and he made a lengthy statement in mitigation, which I'm sure is on the net and you can look that up. And I think he did actually cover these in full, these matters. There was, up to me going to see Sir David Napley, a feeling in my own mind that as a newspaper had wired somebody for sound and sent him into my apartment to get me to talk about sexual matters in the privacy of my own home, and that was a chap who claimed to me that he was over 21, made the same claim on the newspaper's tape recording that he was over 21. He happened to be under 21, he happened to be 19. I thought I had a defence that although he was under 21, I thought he was over 21, therefore I had a defence. Sir David Napley, when I first saw him, disabused me. He said there was a lacuna in the law. The case was different in the heterosexual case to the homosexual case. And as soon as he told me that, I made arrangements for Sir David on my behalf to continue with a guilty plea.
So, I mean, you'd never knowingly had a relationship with anyone under 21 at that time, so you never knowingly committed what was then an illegal act?
People I was meeting in the 1980s were, to my knowledge, over 21.
And what about the prostitution point? I mean, had you ever knowingly used a prostitute?
I refer you to what I said earlier, that I regard sexual matters to be private. And I'm not asking you your sexual proclivities or what you do in your bedroom, and I hope you will bear with me and not ask me mine, unless it's concerning
But there may be
illegality.
relevance to how things can be misconstrued. I suppose that's why it's a relevant question.
It's relevant, and I think if I rely on Sir David Napley's mitigation speech at the Magistrates' Court. Yes, sir.
Just regarding the 3 deaths, you said you were given no names of the victims of
That is correct.
Of the alleged murders. Did the police give any indication that they had got any further in identifying who these people were, even if they had given you no names?
No. Sorry, I can't see your hand because the light is right behind you. I'm not ignoring you.
No, I know you're not.
It's just that, like me, you're rather invisible.
I'll come out if you like. You told everybody earlier that you were asked about a penknife. Have the police asked you for a DNA test of any sort? And if they asked you to do that voluntarily, would you do so?
The police have asked me about DNA in connection with an item. The item has nothing to do with anything that happened in the 1970s or 1980s, because the item is only 3 or 4 years old. On that basis, on legal advice, my sisters advised me not to give DNA. If, of course, the police wish to arrest me, charge me, then DNA will be available to them.
What was that item?
I beg your pardon?
What was that item?
A piece of clothing.
And what was the implication of that item of clothing from 3 to 4 years?
You should ask the police that. You should ask the police why they took 2 shoehorns that were given to me 4 or 5 years ago. Completely baffling. Any other questions or?
Have
Yes,
you
sir.
asked the police for explanation of this credible and true phrase at all? Have they given you any explanation since they said it? You're so critical of that, of them using that. You might have asked them why they did.
The attitude of the police at interview is that I am there to answer their questions. They are not there to answer mine. That didn't mean that I did not answer them. A very large number of questions which, had they given the answers, it would have facilitated their investigation. But they chose to conduct their operation, their interview in their own way. They've got a perfect right to do that. I don't think that that has facilitated or speeded up the process of their investigation. I think we may be coming to an end, but thank you very much indeed for attending this afternoon. I'm sorry the room is quite so small, but I'm most grateful to you. Thank you very much.